Okay, this is Dr. James VONDUTCH speaking, and it's Friday, the 1st of May 2026, and right now I'm on Smithwood Way in Coventry City Centre, and I'm just going to give you a tour view guide going through the West Orchards from this end. There's the other entrance is the Ironmonger side, so we'll go out that way. You can come in from that way as well. And the weather's a lot better today, obviously. It's improved considerably. And it does feel like summer. And yesterday, if you can remember, I was mentioning that it was Citizen Housing Group Company orders by a Coventry County Court that literally snatched my house, my former family council home on Vine Street in Coventry, back on the 26th of April 2023. And the reason being, the arrears for the rent had built up, and the main tenant, that was my mother, the late mother, who sadly died last year on 4th of January 2025 at a captive care home at Harperfields Care Home in Borsal Common, Solihull District, about 7 miles from VHS Airport. That's where she died, and she was held captive there, but they never returned her home. As a result, she was served a notice to quit by the Citizen Housing Group because she no longer lived at Vine Street. They never returned her back, and that's what jeopardised my stay there as well. And the rent arrears literally just escalated. It built up from her absence. Obviously, I couldn't pay the rent in her name, but I was waiting for the tenancy agreement to be transferred in my name as successor, and that never happened. And it wasn't exactly Buckingham Palace that I was going to inherit. It's just a 3-bedroom house. And I was temporarily the caretaker there until I was given the notice to leave as well, eviction orders. So they snatched that house, literally. And I was rendered homeless on the 26th of April 2023. And I was forced to sleep rough inside my car, a Peugeot 207 SW Estate, which I managed to get in the nick of time. But I no longer have that car. Sadly, it was sold last year for scrap as it failed MOT in May 2025. So about a year ago, it failed MOT. So I couldn't just afford to get it repaired at the end of the day, and I had to depart with it. But it got me through 13 plus months anyway. That's the main thing, that ordeal that I went through, before I was eventually spotted by the homeless team from the JCT Centre on Lamb Street, the Jesus Centre. And their home reach outreach workers discovered me sleeping rough in my car in May 2024, and I was offered supported housing accommodation ever since, a room to myself in a shared house, and that's where I've been ever since. But I was bidding for Coventry Home Finder, a property of my own, and obviously they let me down miserably and badly, and during my time of need. Although I was given brand true priority, they never actually gave me any suitable property that I could live in as alternative abode. So the rent arrears built up, and that's how they pursued that line of eviction. I could have paid them, but it wouldn't have been in my name, you see. I was still waiting for the tenancy agreement to be put in my name. In other words, make me the tenant of that property on my street, and so they shouldn't have really snatched my late mother from that property. She might have even lived longer, and obviously I wouldn't have been homeless. So they had no right to take that off her. That's whose house I was living in anyway. It wasn't my house under my tenancy agreement. It was under her tenancy agreement. She was the main occupant, the main tenant, responsible for paying the rent. That's what I got to let my viewers know, you see. But I could have paid the rent, but it wouldn't have been under my name, and that's what I was waiting for. That contract or agreement, a tenancy agreement, that's what they call it. So then I would be legally obliged to pay it under my name, and that never came. That tenancy agreement never came under my name, and that's where the failure was on behalf of Citizen Housing Group. That could have avoided my homelessness. Alternatively, they could have offered me an alternative abode. They've got thousands of other properties, and I could have just went there smoothly from that 3-bedroom house to a different property, with probably less bedrooms, I think that's what they wanted. They wanted to put a family up there. Obviously, being stingy on space. So they took that house on the basis of the rent arrears being built up. They allowed the rent arrears to build up by not putting the tenancy agreement in my name quick enough. So it's their doing. They knew exactly what they're doing, because that's the usual routine. If you allow the rent arrears to build up, then you can build a case up against anyone, squatters or whatever, whoever's living in that property, either it's tenants or non-tenants. The case that you build up is that they're not paying the rent, and the arrears are built up to such a level that the courts will definitely grant them the property. So it was a hostile takeover, deliberately, obviously, letting the rent arrears to build up by not allowing myself on the tenancy agreement as successor. They should have put me down as a tenancy successor a lot earlier and without really delay, so that the rent can be continued to be paid. That's the biggest fault on that company's fault, the Citizen Housing Group. It would have been a smooth transition, and I would have been a successor of that property, responsible for paying rent in my own name, not in my mother's name, the main tenant, who no longer lived there because they never returned her back, unfortunately. Yes, the other option, they should have either returned her back to the house, her house that is. So I'm not bothered which one it was. Either they should have sent her back home, to her home, and then that way you could have paid the rent, or put me down as successor. So they did neither. They didn't want me as successor or my mother as the tenant there. So that's the thing that happened there. That's what have been remembered. People are wondering, did they side with one, not the other? They didn't side with either one of us, not with the main tenant, that was my mother, and they didn't side with me either. Next of kin and obviously successor. That's what I've got to say really about that ordeal. And if they'd sent her back from the care homes, obviously she could have been there like she was before, and the meals could have been provided to her like the usual way, the care worker sending the meals over. That was her home, technically speaking, and she lived over 40 years. She did suffer from dementia, that was the problem. So she couldn't put anyone down on a will or something. But they could have put me on the tenancy agreement, definitely, as successor, as next of kin, which they failed to do, and allowed the rent arrears to build up so that they can then pursue the line by taking court action to evict me. That's how they did it. So it is a kind of a fiddle. They stole that way, allowing the rent arrears to build up. and not putting the tenancy agreement in my name so that I could pay the rent early enough to avoid any rent arrears building up or otherwise. There's no way that I could have fallen behind in rent payments if the tenancy agreement had been put in my name early enough. As soon as I had informed them that she's not living there, in fact, they were aware of that. They were aware that she'd been taken and snatched by NHS and social service officials and put in care homes. They were aware of that. I hadn't even informed them. But Citizen Housing Group failed in their duty, therefore, by not acting swiftly enough to put me as a successor on the tenancy agreement. That way they would have continued to receive the rent from me directly. No excuses. But it was deliberate, obviously, because without the arrears being built up, they couldn't really build up a court case against me to evict me from there. So they deliberately allowed arrears to build up so they could evict me. So that was the line they took, not to support me as a tenant there, but rather the opposite, to evict me, just like they evicted my mother. I mean, it was the social services, NHS officials who actually snatched her out of her home. And this is Fairfax Street, and that's where I used to park my car, near the Britannia Hotel. Most of the time I was there, but I was at other places as well. I parked my car on New Bold Road, was it New Bold Street, in Leamington Spa, near the Jefferson Garden Park, so I used to park it there as well as other locations. And obviously I used to do day trips to the continent as well. I was usually back the following day, and obviously his customs were extremely bad as ever, questioning me, interrogating me whenever I left or entered the country. What's your purpose of travel? How much money you got on you, etc., etc., and then searching my car as well as me sometimes, and taking my passport as well. Last time I went was 24th of October 2024, and that's the last time I went with my car to the continent. It's from Folkestone, the Lee Shuttle train. The Lee Shuttle train, and that's what I had experienced a lot of problems there. And also at the other end, Calais end as well. They kept my old passports, one of my old passports, an expired passport, which I was also carrying with me. And you can't really use that passport anyways. The corner is usually cut off on expired UK passports, and it's usually known that they're void or something. There's no way you can reuse those passports, and obviously the date as well would show that it's invalid, obviously expired. So that's what's really happened, and I wasn't happy with the customs there anyway. I did complain about my service mistreatment, and having to pay for a ticket to get to Europe, and then that sort of experience, having to go through that ordeal, that interrogation. They profile you at the end of the day when you're going on your own, because you're a single person, you fit that description. I think they should profile them. I think they should be reversed, like Superman in the North Pole when he loses his powers, and on one occasion he gains his powers. So they should be reversed. They should reverse that and find out what their background is and what kind of people they are. Because I doubt if they're from the diverse community or representing UK. I think they're just kind of extreme people there. The customs, especially at Folkestone, Eurotunnel. I don't think they represent the border security force, and especially the ones when you get through those gates through the customs, and you're about to board the train, the Lee Shuttle train. Do they fit the description of the diverse communities or individuals in the UK? Individuals like me, loners like me, for instance, do they fit that description? I doubt it. I don't think they have that background, do they? Reverse it, they do profiling on people like me. All I'm saying is profile them. What kind of description would they come up under, and put them under scrutiny? I should be able to go in and out of a country freely and without really restrictions or searches like that, and delaying my travel, etc., and ruining my trip and really my experience, especially when I'm paying for the ticket and I'm having to suffer that ordeal. It's horrendous, and it's not cheap going across. Getting piggyback across the Eurotunnel, the shuttle train. It's not cheap experience. So I would prefer some sort of compensation. They never compensated me, and obviously they're saying they're separate to the operators, the shuttle operators. They're separate to them. They operate independently. So that's them anyway. But I used to enjoy my day out still, even though it's a bad experience sometimes. But that was the old days. That's when I had a car, and that's when I had more access to money than right now, obviously. And obviously it all started when Boris Johnson resigned. That's when I lost my council house, in effect. And Liz Truss was Prime Minister for temporarily the shortest lived Prime Minister in UK history. That's when I got my 3 points on my licence for doing 57 mph, where the cameras were saying 50, but on my sat nav it was saying the maximum speed is 60. So I was under the assumption I'm doing 3 less than actually 60, according to my sat nav. That was the hired car that I'd picked up, was given at, I think it was Guston Road in Dover. When my car broke down, it had a clutch failure, and I waited 12 hours at Guston petrol station, the Shell Guston petrol station in Dover, for my courtesy car to be given to me, which I drove back, and I was quite slow actually. The persons that drove my car back on the truck arrived at my home even faster than me. I arrived about 10 minutes, 15 minutes after them, so that's how slow I was. But I was shocked to find out that I got the speeding ticket. Incidentally, that week Liz Truss resigned, and if you can recall, Liz Truss was in favour of unlimited speed limits, like in Germany, the Autobahn system. She was in favour of that, and what they're doing in the UK was contrary to that, opposite, giving me points on the basis that I was exceeding a local traffic speed camera, where there's a small stretch of the road where it turned from 60 to 50, and it didn't actually show up on my sat nav. I did appeal, but they never allowed the appeal, so I paid £100 for that, and I had 3 points put on my licence for a speeding offence. And that week, I think Liz Truss resigned, and then they put Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, and obviously the proceedings to get my house escalated when he was there on top, and that's when they did it under his pretense, under his premiership, when he was the incumbent PM. That was Rishi Sunak, through his Conservative Party, who had put him there through the elections when Liz Truss resigned. And doing his way, obviously that's when citizen housing got vile. They evicted me from the house rather than put me on a tenancy agreement. So I've got to let that know. And during this government, incidentally, I lost my car. My MOT, it failed the MOT. And I do miss my car. I'm not even a car owner, a car driver. That's what's happened under this government. If you think it's anything to do with the government's luck or something. So that tenancy agreement, if it was under my name, I would have been responsible and obliged to pay for the rent there. But it never happened. That's where the fault was. And Coventry Home Finder, don't let them off the hook either. When I was rendered homeless, why didn't they provide me an alternative boat to go to, another occupancy in another property elsewhere in the city? It's a lousy system. They failed me miserably at my time of need. So they're all to blame to some extent. And the local MP was Zara Sultana, and she was a Labour MP. That's the person I approached. She was fully aware of what was going on. I'd sent her emails, and she had a secretary working for her, and together they couldn't even secure my housing rights, or my property, or alternative place of abode to go to. In fact, I slept rough 13 months even after approaching them for help. So that was the local MP, and there's a local Labour government here, by the way, at the time, locally, even though it was Conservative then nationally, with a puppet government by Rishi Sunak at the top, bragging and boasting about multi-millionaire, the Prime Minister, which meant nothing to me, and I had to sleep rough in my car when he was around. It's a horrendous ordeal. And even now, to this day, I mean, new government, my circumstances hasn't improved. I'm only in supported housing at the moment, and like I said, I don't even have a car anymore. I'll end this video now. You've been listening to Dr. James VONDUTCH. A social media content creator on multiple platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for over 5 years now, and a Coventry resident who is originally from Coventry, a city in the West Midlands area of England, UK, on the 52nd parallel north latitude.